Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar between Sqreen and NearForm. We are really happy to have you all here tonight or this morning for those who are on the Pacific time. Tonight we have three amazing panelists. So I'm happy to introduce David Gonzalez, who is a develop consultant at NearForm.
Hello, hello.
Alex Knoll, who is also DevOps consultant at NearForm.
Hello.
And Jean-Baptiste Avia, who is co-founder and CTO of Sqreen.
Hello.
Tonight's topic will be about DevOps and how to integrate security into DevOps. So you can expect a meeting, a panel about applications, application security, continuous integrations, productions, and a lot of other fun topics. I hope we will have time to cover all of them. So as an introduction, I will ask each of our panelists if they can introduce themselves a bit longer. And at the same time, I guess, can you also, all three, tell me what does DevSecOps means to you? Let's start with David. What does DevSecOps means to you?
Yeah, so I am David Gonzalez. As you said before, I am a DevOps consultant in NearForm. I work hand by hand with Alex as well. So to me, basically DevSecOps is the way on how you ensure that your DevOps processes are as secure as your traditional software processes, if not better, by leveraging new tools and new methodologies into DevOps to avoid new attack vectors, because as you know, when you are doing DevOps, you need to kind of make a compromise on who can access what, and that's where security can get very, very risky.
All right. Alex, what would be your take on that topic, and who are you, Alex?
Yes, well, like David said, I'm also a DevOps consultant at NearForm. Two sentences about my background. I was a full stack developer for 10 plus years, longer than I care to remember. And I kind of specialized into DevOps with a focus on security a couple of years ago. And really, to me, the importance of security for DevOps is kind of the ease that it gives product teams or development teams to just keep things secure. So typically, this is like a multi-stage process where whenever something is done, it gets handed off to a security team or security people, and by automating that, you kind of take away a lot of the friction and just make it very easy for things to become and stay secure.
All right. And now, JB, what would be your take on that?
So I'm JB, so I'm CTO and co-founder of Sqreen. Prior to Sqreen, I was I've been working for 5 years as a pen tester in helping a lot of companies building their security and pen testing their infrastructures. And I did the same thing at Apple, basically, where I met my co-founder. And today, so we are helping democratizing security. To me, DevSecOps is a real enabler of security in modern companies, where the goal of all companies is to make the developers' velocity as high as possible while keeping quality, but also security. And so that's how we can enable companies to keep a high velocity with great security. And so the goal of DevSecOps today is to empower developers as much as possible to keep security in mind when they start a feature and up to when they release a feature.
Thanks a lot. And I guess I have just one other side question for David or Alex and for JB. Can you just quickly introduce what your company do? Alex, can you just in 2 words describe what NearForm does, please?
I'm not sure if I can do it in 2 words, but we build solutions mainly using web technologies, Node.js predominantly. And then we also build all the automation around integrating and deploying those things. And David and I are part of the DevOps part of the company, the department.
All right, and JB, in 2 words, what is Sqreen about?
So Sqreen is an application security monitoring solution, and so protection and monitoring. Basically, we are like New Relic. We install in just 1 line of code, and we can detect and protect your application against a technical threat like the OWASP top 10, but also we allow our users to monitor their business security. So, for instance, implement monitoring, right limitation, and build security around some of your business use cases.
Awesome, and that's a great transition, because my first question tonight would be, what is the biggest challenge around DevOps and security? So, Alex, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, one of the biggest discussions I usually have with clients and development teams is around awareness, where when you start talking about security, you kind of start at the threats. So what are the things threatening us as a company or our application when it's exposed to the web? And many times companies are saying, look, we haven't been hacked before, so why should I invest X amount of money in security tools and systems? So that's usually where the discussion starts. So let's keep it at that for now.
Yeah, right. And JB, as a security specialist. I would ask, what would be the biggest risks today on an application? Because Alex told us about application people who never got hacked, so are not expecting to get hacked. As a security guy, what would be your biggest threat of the application in your mind?
So the threat on the applications are several. There are 2 main families, like generic business, generic technical threats. You have the OWASP top 10. So that's the typical errors and bugs you will introduce when programming your application. So despite all the modern practices we have today on development and security, we still do bugs. Developers still do bugs, and there is no much questions around that. Just a fraction of these bugs is security related. So mechanically, you always get security issues in any application. That's the main. That's one of the 2 categories. The second category is more on the business side of things. Applications are getting more and more complex, and nowadays most of the business logic is done by frameworks. You don't like reinvent the wheel on each and any application. So the way we push new code is, this new code is only business logic. So the second source of threat is inside this business logic, where it gets very hard to monitor. If you have like a microservice environment, you need to have like some specialized tool to get visibility and monitoring over your application. Also, that's on an application-wide level, but as a security person, if your goal is still to enable developers to work as fast as possible, you don't get a lot of visibility on which are the new applications that are pushed. Like most of our clients today, they are migrating to new cloud environments and to modern infrastructure tools such as Kubernetes to allow and enable the developer teams to push more applications faster.
That's extremely interesting. And you've discussed about new application pushed, and I believe David can tell us about what will be the role of the DevOps into that flow and what other security threats are more linked to the daily DevOps role.
Yeah, so basically, I completely agree with JB. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems is visibility. Like one of the questions we usually ask to our customers, when was the last time you got hacked and you knew it? And that sparkles the, oh my God, we're being hacked without knowing it. And that's like, it's a very common situation where, you know, a good hacker who gets into your system, he won't leave any footprint. So you could be exposing data for months and not even knowing about it. So I think the best way that a DevOps can improve the security in the company, not only at the technical level, but also at the business level, is just giving visibility to what is going on in the system, like in a vertical slice, that at any point using tools like, for example, Sqreen and some others, know exactly what's going on, because people tend to look at risks or security problems as 1 or 0, and it's not by far 1 or 0. It's like there is a huge amount of grays in the middle, where, you know, there are risks that you would like to, I mean, you could be living with them comfortable, but some other risks which are completely a no-go, so you need to mitigate them. So I think the role of the DevOps engineer in security, it's more around giving visibility and having the tools in place to remediate or mitigate the vulnerability once it's being exploited.
And speaking of this role, how can you, as a DevOps, be empowered to handle security? What will make the DevOps life easier, or at least more powerful into reaching that stage?
Well, you have visibility of the full software development lifecycle, from the early days on conception up to the last days when you deploy it to production. So you know exactly where are all the sensible points for security problems. So that's the power you need, together with the tools that you use in your system, to be able to just give visibility, get the data from the system, and then someone on the driving seat to take a decision on whether it's acceptable to live with some risk, or we want to just completely mitigate all of them.
So I definitely agree, David. That's JB speaking. And that's completely the vision I think we all have for DevOps. One thing that is not trivial with it is that as a DevOps, you need to do several things. Like you need to culturally change the way developers see and behave regarding security. So yeah, they need to understand that when you do a pull request, yes, you need to check the security very specifically. But as a DevOps, you also need to move the development lifecycle towards security. So each time moving the development lifecycle toward velocity, the developers are happy, because like all developers think that their test is taking too much time, and we cannot blame them. But as a DevOps, if you enable like a security layer in the continuous integration system, then you also need to deal a lot with change and how the developers will perceive this. And that's a lot of effort, communication, even psychology that need to come from the DevOps in order to make the developers take this into account.
I also wanted to add something to that. You made some good points there. One of the things that we've done for a client in the past is discuss how we can integrate security into the KPIs for developers, or actually everybody on the product team. So because typically when the going gets tough and it's, you know, the end of the sprint or whatever the release date or something is approaching, then all that really matters is getting the features out the door. And once you factor in that next to let's say a feature specification, also you need to check the boxes for compliance or certain security requirements, let's say the OWASP top 10 or maybe a few others. If you integrate that into the evaluation of when a feature is done, that makes it easier for people to spend time on it. And that is one of the things that I've seen quite a lot, where developers just didn't know how to allocate time for spending time on security, building their feature or bug fix.
I see. I mean, so do you build trust relationships with developers as DevOps? How do you manage to make them transition from security is a pain to security should be one of my daily tasks, one of my daily point of thinking?
Well, if I can take this one, I think the best tool and the best skill that a DevOps engineer should have is de-escalation. Like, you usually get called, like when you work for a company like NearForm, when the project is on fire. And the first thing that you need to do is de-escalate the situation, because usually there has been kind of a fight going on between InfoSec and product teams. So once you are able to just settle the water, you can start just telling them what are they doing wrong, or if they are not doing anything wrong, where are they failing from your point of view, because we don't know everything. And then once that's there, it's a kind of a slow change of the mindset of everyone, from the InfoSec department towards the product and how it's developed, and from the product teams towards InfoSec and how they assess the situation. Because what I find the most is that what it fails is the language. It's not really the work they are doing. It's just the communication.
Oh,
yeah, you make an excellent point. I think DevOps as a role and as a person should be embedded in the team, but should definitely be a good communicator. So to me, it is impossible to be like this super technical person that knows everything about shell scripts and pen testing and everything, but is unable to convey this to other people and to discuss these subjects with developers who are obviously very technical, but also product managers or even higher level managers to kind of get across that these things are important and why they are important. So yeah, a good point. Communication is paramount.
It's especially true when you are at the beginning of the inception of the DevSecOps, and that's something we get asked a lot by customers. Do you have any advice on how I should hire my first security engineer? And yes, I 200% agree. Like your first security engineer or the people that is gonna lead the DevSecOps transformation needs to have a super soft skills and communication skills in order to deal with change, to explain what is doing to everyone, but also to know where to start, because each company is different and you don't come with a precise recipe you will put in place. You obviously need to adapt to the practices and to the strength you will already see in the organization.
Sorry, I always say the same when I start a new project. One of the first phrases I say is, whenever you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So what I'm trying to do when I start a new project is giving them more tools than just a hammer in order to be able to build what they want to build.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
And I really like this discussion about the role of DevOps, DevSecOps into a team, because in my understanding, in my opinion, the DevOps will be handling production, and the DevOps will be the person in charge to detect attacks and to come back to the developer team to tell, hey, people, we have been attacked on that point. So in your experience, what's the best way to understand what's happening on production when it's under attack, when it's at risk, and how to communicate that knowledge to a dev team based on real events? Like, hey, last week we have been under attack from this country on this endpoint on this app, and they use these mechanisms. JB, what would be your go-to way of monitoring application and communicating to a dev team?
So depends which tool you are using. Like in traditional security solution is mostly handled not by DevOps but by security team, and so you don't have a lot of communication there. And the more you move towards more modern organizations, more of the security tools will go in the cloud. So obviously, I'm a bit biased on this as CTO on Sqreen, but our belief and our purpose is to democratize security. So our solution is built into the application. So if you take any a modern development company, you push applications in the cloud. You have maybe microservices and several layers of them. If you take traditional security solutions, they are on the edge, like, I don't know, AWS WAF or other similar solutions will work on the edge. And what you need is visibility from inside your application to know what's happening and when it's happening and where in your layer of microservices. To us, the shift we are doing in security today is similar to the shift we have done on performance in the past 10 years. Like 10 or 15 years ago, when you were monitoring performances, it was from the age of the network. You were just computing an amount of time, like, okay, this web page takes 100 milliseconds to be rendered. And tools such as New Relic or App Dynamics, they allow developers to get more visibility inside their applications. These tools, they have been a real enabler of DevOps, because it allowed developers to work with ops, because on the same tool you had the slowness of the code and the slowness of the database. So you were able to spot these integrations. Security is going in the same direction with distributing security across each and any application. So yeah, monitoring security on a modern application infrastructure need to be done inside the applications. That's the only way to get visibility today.
Makes sense. And that leads me to something else. That would be, hey, you've got your way of doing security directly from your app. Is there, if you have a tool to monitor production, is there any other things you want to automate in your DevSecOps or in your security journey as an engineer? David, maybe you have opinions about that.
Yes, I do. So, like automation, it's a tricky one because people trying to automate security, they need to be on the mindset that they won't be able to automate 100%. It's a fairly complex activity to be 100% handled by a machine. And what is even more is, how do you automate things that you don't really know? Because every single security vulnerability gets assigned a CVE. What happens if you are exposed to a vulnerability which does not have a CVE? Like, how do you automate that? How do you automate that detection? So you need to be able to live with the fact that you are going to be able to automate around 60 to 80% of your security, but you will still need someone to go and check manually things, which is kind of the boring part, but needs to be done. So that's the only way I can see it happening. For me, if I have money in a company to automate security, the first thing I will do is behavioral monitoring. Like, that's for sure what I will actually do in a system. That means that you install a monitoring tool in your production servers, and whenever something happens, which is usually not happening, like someone opening a bash shell or someone opening a connection to a remote web server, which we never done before, we will get alerted. And then we can filter if this is a real threat or not, because, I mean, scanning vulnerabilities is good, but it's also limited. So once you are able to scan the vulnerabilities on CI, it's kind of more being pushed back into the developer's activity more than kind of the real-time production one. But if you are able to scan real-time what's going on in production with tools like Sqreen, Falco, or similar, you are for sure able to be very cost-effective on detection.
Thank you.
I actually have a question for JB. A little while ago, we had this vulnerability in that an NPM package during installation would be sending stuff off to a third-party server. So it was obviously compromised. Does Sqreen have capability to detect those kinds of things too, or is it purely runtime detection?
So Sqreen is purely runtime detection. Though what we offer today is, I have a story. Like, we have a couple customers, but it also happened like to Instagram, where these people, they forget a server that they deployed for like a marketing purposes. So that's the thing you rush you deploy, it's useful during the 2 months of the advertisement of a specific feature, and then you forget about it. And plenty of companies get hacked because they forgot this server, and this server had a very old version of the application that got vulnerable as time is passing. What we do, since we are in the runtime and we monitor all of your applications, then we don't forget this application either. So each time a new vulnerable package is released, so we will tell you, look, this legacy application is vulnerable to this new package, and maybe you just forget about it, and so you can get back to it later. For the specific vulnerability you're mentioning, that's something that you would do when you install your application. So actually you're right, but the thing that will be impacted is like the developer machine, maybe the staging, and most likely the CI. And that's, yeah, we don't monitor like the CI as per se today.
Yeah, so that's actually something what David was describing. If you have a generic monitoring tool that just tracks behavior and kind of measures that against what is normal, considered normal, that would be useful in such a scenario, right? Where you say, okay, hey, all of a sudden CI is now sending or opening a socket out to this website we don't know.
Yeah, it may be, but in this specific example where the installation, that's the package installation that was vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Are we talking about ESLint case?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's something that run in your CI, right? During build phase, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And CI is not the thing you will typically monitor from the security point of view. And I completely agree that behavioral monitoring is it's something that has great capabilities and great potential. They are monitoring the CI like that. I think that's one of the environments where the developers are the most active, and like automating tests is one big pillar of DevOps. I guess it's not the easiest to monitor with such solutions.
Yeah, it's typically also an environment that is kind of, got a lot of stuff bolted on because now we need this and now we need that, and when we develop new apps or new packages, then things are just kind of thrown in there because it's just CI. But this kind of showed us that even that part of the software development lifecycle we need to monitor and make sure it is secure and not doing anything we don't want.
Yeah, completely agree.
And that's, what tools should you provide in your CI for developers to care more about security? Because it seems to be a critical endpoint, a critical part of the application deployment, and especially for DevOps. And that also joins a question we're having from the audience. Where would you start implementing security? Would CI be one of the first place you deploy security? Would it be continuous integration, continuous deployment? And we will get back to that question later because it's a double one.
So
I would say, go ahead.
Sorry. Obviously you need to prioritize what you do, because you cannot push everything at once. If you already have CI/CD, and one of the things you want to do is to sensibilize the developers, what we currently advise today is to just add progressively many checks in the CI. It could start with a simple security linting. I don't know, if you have a Rails application, you can check that all the queries are going through the ORM. If you have a React application, you can check that inner dangerous HTML is never called. That's very simple test that if the matches are always relevant and are usually easy to fix. And if you provide developers with a simple way to check things that has never false positives, that's a good way to earn their trust. If from day one you enable all the security linting options and you have like a 1,000-line report with half of them being false positives, you will lose the developer trust and they will never use it. So go the other way and start small and iterate on all the security fixes you recommend your developers to implement.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even more, one of the things that I think many companies are failing together in DevSecOps is the educational part. I mean, I've been in a situation where you just go into a customer and see many problems in the source code, and it's like, why don't you fix this? Which is like, 3 or 4 hours of work, and you will be already in a good position. And then suddenly a developer coming back saying, oh, is this a security problem? And it's like, well, yes. I mean, just printing the OWASP top 10 in a card and hand it over to the developers and answering questions about, how do you understand what, for example, a cross-site scripting is, or do you understand what cross-site request forgery token is used for? That's kind of the best head start that we can give to developers, because the same thing with books, like no one really commits code with books intentionally. There are things that you either don't know or you completely miss. So
yeah, and that's a continuous learning process, because like a company is evolving. You have N developers on day one, and 2 months after you may have new developers and all developers that left the company. So even the security knowledge of the whole organization is evolving. So you need to sensibilize all of your developers to the same problems, but you cannot like spend 1 full week of training with each of them. So the security training need to be distilled bit by bit in the developers team. And also at onboarding, you need the new guys to catch up on all the security practices you have in your organization. And one good things to do it, and that's what we do at Sqreen, for instance. We are a security company, so it's a bit unusual, but we have regular developers and everyone enjoy it. Like we do hack nights. So it's a night when we have salad and pizza and drinks, and everyone can work on a specific vulnerable projects. And so we have a lot of very security minded people in the company that are helping others that just want to level up. And that's one really, really fun way to spread the word about security inside Sqreen, and for us to take newcomers and really give them a very good sense of security. And even if your developers, they are not 100% aware of the full OWASP top 10, they will still be more conscious about security. And security, the way you want to build it with your developer and within your company, it's a lot about culture. And if you instill this cultural knowledge inside your company, then people will ask and they will be more conscious about it, and they will just make less mistakes and think to it more and more.
Yeah, you're completely right. I believe the same along the same lines. I think it should be very easy for developers to become secure. So it should, very accessible to get training or to become aware of risks. But on the other side, when you do have automated systems checking for security issues, it is critical that you present those in a nice visibility layer, a dashboard, or some in-house app that is used by the team. So you can kind of gamify a little bit the security flow, where you can, for instance, plot out on a graph the number of vulnerabilities that you have as a total, or some other metrics that you can then see go down as the team gets more involved in security. And this kind of comes back to the KPI thing I was mentioning before, where it should be incentivized, like from an evaluation perspective, for team members to just be more secure. So visibility, education, feedback, all of those things, and just plain make it very, very easy for people to become more secure. So automate whatever you can and educate where you cannot.
I love the last discussion we just had, because we mentioned some actionable thing that someone can do, but I feel like most of these items have been built toward people who are already empowered into security. And the question we had in the chat, I really love the way it has been formulated. The question goes to, where do you start as a single security superhero? What happens when you are the only security champion in the company and the company is still growing, so there is no security process and you're not the security head, because you're not the security team yet, you're just one of the engineers within the team. How do you take some leadership on that? What are practical actions that anyone can start to do tomorrow at work or today even, with their colleagues, with their teams, with their CTO, with anyone, when they want to be the security superhero in their environment?
Yeah,
one of the things I did in a past project is organize kind of like a pizza night, but then try to hack the thing that you are working on in that company. So, I mean, if you're completely at the beginning, there's nothing there yet, so then it doesn't work. But if you already have something, and usually there's like a proof of concept or whatever, then you know, just sit down with the team and try to hack it and experience how easy it is in some cases.
Yeah, and obviously, like the first days of any initial security champion in a company, if you are the first, are really critical, because that's a moment where you require a lot of maturity and psychology, where you will need to get a lot of information to understand what are the practices, what are the best practices that are followed by the company, but also the less good practices, and the one you will need to work upon. And you really need to get friendly with everyone to get the full knowledge. It's not like as if you are an external auditor and you are paid to get a result. Here you are the colleague to these people, and you just need to kill the shame. Just be open and transparent about what you are doing, and let's try to improve it together. My goal is not to make your life harder. My goal is to improve the security of the business. It's good for all of us in the end. And just on this specific subject, we wrote a content that is called the First Security Engineers checklist. And so that's points that are very actionable, and that as a first security engineer you can follow very easily, and they are sorted by week, month, quarter. Very, very actionable, and based on our current experiences of what people should do to start security implementation.
Yeah, I always say the same: be an enabler, not a blocker. I remember one of my first play days with security was in a company a few years back. We had a very strict security review process for our code. And one recurring bug that we kept getting back from security was cross-site scripting on JavaScript, like content that actually not cross-site scripting, like unescaped or unvalidated output or validated input. And what I did was basically I wrote a simple script which with regular expressions was looking for these type of patterns, which, you know, the false positive ratio was fairly low, unexpectedly low, to be honest. And then everybody was like, wow, that's really working. So instead of blocking people by, you know, coming back to them saying, oh, there is a security vulnerability here, fix it, 2 days before production, they need to go through QA again, we just give them a tool which basically allows you to do the scanning upfront without having to go to security and making sure that things are more secure.
Yeah, I think that's amazing to go fast and like it's a very good initial step to like get friendly with the developers. What you want is to empower the developers to take care of their own security, and you want them to be like independent on fixing and finding proactively security issues. And one of the things you need to do when in the next weeks playing the long-term game is definitely to give them this sense of ownership that security is their own. We are the security team. We are available for questions, and we are really happy to help you and discuss process and specifications and whatsoever. But in the end, you ship the code. You own the security of this code.
Yeah, I also wanted to add that a product I've worked with in the past called BearaCode, and they have kind of a unique approach to static code analysis. I mean, the actual analysis is not revolutionary. I mean, it's like in many cases, they do have quite a few false positives. But the interesting thing they do is that instead of kind of claiming that you should block the build because of one of these findings, instead they provide links to learning material for the specific subject that was detected. So if they find SQL injection or cross-site scripting or something that they have learning material for, they will provide that to the committer as a learning possibility for that specific subject. And the second thing I wanted to mention is that when you want to make it very easy for developers to be secure in the initial phases of a project, so including all kinds of packages that you need to, like a framework or utilities, etc., to quickly build an application. It pays off to have a tool that is able to run really, really quick on commit and maybe even on file change. And then I know of something called Sqreen that does that, where they're even able to be plugged into your CI system, so that whenever a developer checks something in that contains a vulnerability, they will actually do a fix PR on that repo that updates a package to a fixed version, to a non-vulnerable version of that package. So all you really have to do as a developer is say, okay, well, I didn't know that. Thank you, merge PR, and now I'm more secure than I was before. All of these are kind of empowering developers to not make mistakes at the beginning of a project. And the fact that things are used in the beginning and then left alone for the duration of a project is something that you see quite a lot. And I cannot stress enough that you should keep your dependencies and your packages up to date and have a system in place for your developers to feedback that things are out of date. It is also to help them that when new versions come out to, at least consider those and upgrade if possible.
Yeah, definitely. And tools, you mentioned Sqreen. It's the same like as GitHub is doing some security alerts also. These tools are amazing for your CI, and that's really things that are that cost like zero time and need to be integrated in all CI. There is no question about this. Completely agree.
Quickly, I just have a logistic note. That would be, we are taking questions from the audience, so feel free to write any question in the chat, and they are transmitted to us. And I will interrupt the panelists. We will carry on the panel, but I will add the question from the chat starting now. So guys, carry on. Feel free to carry on talking about tools, but I might move to audience question.
And tools, yeah, that's a subject that is a bit universal. One of the hard things here is that it depends a lot on the language. You have on Ruby on Rails, you have Breakman that is like amazing regarding code vulnerabilities. In the Node.js ecosystem, it's a bit harder. You don't have a lot of static analyzers that are doing a really great job that you can easily plug in your CI. So all the tools are quite different. Also, I have a questions for you, David. How do you recommend doing like security scanning for people with like moving cloud infrastructures, people that are adding maybe endpoint every day or new machines, new DNS endpoints every other day?
Well, that's a tricky one because you need to understand all the systems to be able to successfully assess the security. So you can automate up to a certain point. And what we always recommend is kind of a split on three. One is education for getting people to understand the problematic and the domain of the discussion. Then automation, where you can automate things like, for example, what you asked, like go to an endpoint, do a request, and with this request, check that the security headers are in place, that when you actually log out a user, the user is successfully logged out, and things like that. And you can automate that with, I just blanked out, is a tool from OWASP, called OWASP.
Zap,
exactly, for
Zap
penetration testing. You can also use things like Glue, which works together with Zap in order to do this type of analysis. So you will be surprised how a simple analysis from Zap proxy with the default URLs, how much information will give you about your application. So I was able to find things like, for example, in Java, when you have an error in your SQL query, the error that comes back from Spring says you have an error in this SQL query and then gives you back the SQL query. And that gets sent back to the customer. That's a very bad security problem because you are giving data about the internals of your database, and that's kind of one of the biggest problems that you can leak, aside from passwords and security credentials, to your customers, because that's giving so much information about how you build things that it's almost scary. So in my opinion, you need to do the automation in there. And then what the automation cannot cover needs to be done manually, like penetration testing on a regular basis, people who just go and manually test for security problems and things like that. But then you can support this activity with tools like Sqreen, for example. And we also talk about Sneak or many others that give you the data of what's going on. We even built a vulnerability scanner in NearForm a few months back by a few engineers. The problem that we were trying to solve is, I think everyone here, Alex, Vladimir, and myself, are part of the Node.js security working group. What we do is we triage vulnerabilities reported by hackers in NPM. And then what we do is decide if they are vulnerabilities or not, coordinate the fixing with the maintainer, and then issue a CVE for that vulnerability. It could take, from the time that the vulnerability is public up to when we have the CVE, it could take several weeks. So vulnerability scanners won't be able to detect these vulnerabilities always in your stack. So with the vulnerability that we wrote, Gamma Ray, we are able to immediately, as soon as it's public, able to scan your application for these vulnerabilities. That's one of the examples on how the tool landscape needs to evolve to catch up with what DevOps did in the functional side. I don't know if that was very clear, but DevOps has enabled engineers to deliver amazing things very fast, but the tools for security are not quite there yet. So we need to do a lot more for tools and build better tools and better scanners.
Yeah. When you mention tools, it's maybe a bit out of scope, but one of the things that I see a lot is when you're, Kubernetes is kind of like the default runtime environment for containers these days. You mentioned microservices before, JB. The way that secrets get handed to these things, I've seen it where teams build entire libraries into Java applications. What's happening? Oh, okay. What entire libraries into Java applications to provide access to a vault, for instance. So once the application is hacked, they also now have access to the vault. And you know, if you're lucky, access is limited, but the hacker already knows where the vault is. So you know, one of the features or tools you could say that you have in something like Kubernetes is where you can hand off this access to this secure thing where you can get your secrets, database passwords, or whatever. You can do that into something called an init container, and that then gets shared with the container that actually runs the application. And this kind of works both ways, because now the application developer does not need to know anything about, you know, how do I get my security credentials. I just get handed those things. So, you know, the velocity for the developer kind of increases, and the responsibility for getting access and managing the access to the secure environments like Vault or any of the proprietary ones is managed by the DevOps engineer. So you kind of you know, divide the workload as well.
Great. And we've been having a couple questions from the attendees, so as promised, let's move to them. The first one is actually very actionable, and I think, David, you will like answering it. Honestly, I find doing security on apps that run on Heroku difficult. Do you have any experience, idea, or recommendation for this attendee?
Yeah, so Heroku is a PaaS, and as such, you don't get to see all the infrastructure that goes on. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I didn't use Heroku in a while, but you basically provide an application, and then Heroku runs it and provides the infrastructure for you. So you need to focus on the app security, like pack your application in a Docker container, penetration testing, vulnerability scanner, like, you know, check for vulnerabilities in your dependencies, and in general take the OWASP top 10, which mainly correlates to software, and make sure that none of them are present in your application. I mean, once it's running in Heroku, you are delegating, as the same way that you are delegating the infrastructure, you are delegating the security to Heroku. So you need to trust that Heroku are doing well, and as far as I understand and I know, they are doing very well in security.
And another actionable question, and I think, David, you did a bit of Go. What do you have any suggestion for Go, a tool you would plug and check results into? Do you have a recommendation for a tool? And maybe not specific to Go, we've discussed OWASP, Zap Proxy. Is there a tool that someone could plug and play with for such application?
As of today, I don't know of any application, any scanner that is able to pick up Go dependencies as of today. Go has a Alex?
Sorry to interrupt. I had to check because I know that the guys from SNCC were working on it, and it's mentioned on their website. So go check that one out. I'm not sure how mature it is, because I think it is quite new. But SNCC is a vulnerability scanner detector, so they check your whatever external libraries you have, and if there's any vulnerabilities in there. I'm not even sure how big the CVE database is for those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Be sure to check it out.
Yeah, it's tiny. One thing I always recommend to developers is the 3 mantras that they repeat always around security and app security: input encoding, input validation, output encoding, and SQL injection or injection general prevention. If you are able to validate everything that goes into your system, escape everything that goes out, and make sure that you don't have any SQL injection or no SQL injection, logs injection, any type of injection in particular, you are in a good position. So check for these 3 items in your stack, and then if they are not present, it's a good start already.
Yeah, and so I would mention, when starting any software engineering project, you have several things you need to take into account. Are your developers now, are you trying to solve a problem that will be more easily solved in Ruby rather than in Scala, for instance? Or is PHP the best solution, or is it Node? You have a lot of things you need to answer. The developers' market availability, your existing knowledge in your team, but the security tools related to the language is also something you need to take into account when you kick off a new project. And yes, languages such as Go are one order of magnitude less used than tools such as Node.js for developing web applications, for instance. And so this also explains that their ecosystem is not as rich as the one of Node today. These things are obviously evolving all the time, but that's definitely something you want to take into account as well.
Awesome. I think there is no more question from the audience, and we are approaching the end of this webinar. So I will have a kind of open question for you. That would be, I actually still have a couple of questions for everyone, so if everyone wants to stay. My first one will be maybe a bit quick. What is your favorite vulnerability in the OWASP top 10? Why? And do you have an idea for something outside of the OWASP top 10? David, I think you mentioned injection. What will be your favorite attack, threat, or vulnerability outside the OWASP top 10?
Well, I am actually not too sure. I don't have a favorite vulnerability. I think this year insufficient logging and monitoring cracked into the top 10, and that was my favorite one because you don't realize how dangerous it is not knowing what's going on in your application. But in general, I think, yeah, the lack of monitoring or the lack of visibility. I use a word which is called observability. The lack of observability in your application is my favorite vulnerability because it's so simple to fix that it's almost scary that no one is doing it. So, yeah.
Awesome. Alex, what would be your so maybe I will rephrase, what would be the vulnerability that you met and that was the hardest on you in the OWASP top 10?
Okay. Well, I mean, not technically the hardest, but security misconfiguration is something that is not always in the hands of the team. And by the team, I mean developers, DevOps, everybody who's building a specific application. So it's more around, you know, trying to get the right people to do the right things for security to be tightened or in some cases just changed. So, you know, security misconfiguration.
Awesome. And JB, as a security researcher, I know you have fun when you deal with some of these topics. What is the vulnerability that gave you the best fun time?
Yeah, so it's not about the vulnerability, right? It's about the exploitation of the vulnerability. One very, very fun one we had was a SQL injection that allowed us to build a tunnel, like, you know, with some SQL servers, you can easily get code execution on the SQL server. This way, we managed to build a TCP tunnel that allowed us to connect to an internal port of a server inside the DMZ. And this was a Windows server, so we managed to connect to 3389 by cracking some passwords of the database. We got the clear text of some passwords, so we managed to get authentication on this machine. And when we managed to get authentication, like the first thing any security researcher will do is, oh, there are some administrative scripts on the desktop, so I'm just gonna copy them and retrieve them locally, and I see them later. And I just did it, and poof, the connection was cut. And so, okay, I didn't know what happened, so I'm checking my TCP tunnel. No, it's working. Just the machine doesn't want me to connect there anymore. So, okay, too bad. Checking the script, and one of the scripts was a netstat that was running in a loop, checking if it gets any connection from my personal IP address. When I say personal, it's the one of the office I was working into. And actually the company was monitoring our sales for any connection, and they had a rule and they were updating the firewall to say no, deny access from this IP. So that was that was not very honest on their end, but we had a good fun there. Just saying, yeah, SQL injections can also lead to remote code execution and desktop access. But yeah, funniest, one of the funniest I had.
Awesome. That's a great war story. And I think I will ask my last question. That will be the conclusion for each of you. And what could be done better in app security in general? And more personally, what would make you sleep better at night in the scope of app security? Let's start with Alex, if that works.
What would make me sleep better at night?
Yeah. I mean,
I would say if anybody on the team building the app would at least be able to name 3 of the OWASP top 10 off the top of his head. That would make me sleep better at night.
Awesome. And do you have one last advice for the attendees before we jump to the second conclusion?
Yeah, I can't stress enough, make security as easy as you can.
That's a great one. JB, what could we do? What would make you sleep better at night? And what advice do you have for the viewers today?
So my advice is think of security as an holistic thing. It needs to be part of the culture of your company. From the developers to anyone else in the company, security is critical for anyone. So it takes effort to get everyone understanding that security is the business of everyone in the company. So just take this into account and behave with any security issue just as you would do with any other bug from a response to your team point of view, right? Blameless, but with iterative, incremental improvement mindset point of view.
Awesome. And David, last but not least, same question as for Alex and JB. What would make you sleep better at night, or what advice would you give to everyone listening to us today?
Well, I know, like I used to be a developer. I'm actually coding as well nowadays. So I'm a developer, not full-time because I do also DevOps, but I know people used to and puts a lot of effort on refactoring code to make it beauty and make it, kind of more adhering to the coding standards. I will be happy if people will put the same amount of effort that they put on refactoring code that already works into making secure the code that already works. Yeah.
Awesome. That's no easy task. So I think this panel is over for tonight. Thanks a lot for every speaker who joined it, but more importantly, thanks to every attendee who listened to us today. I hope we can meet soon again. And good evening for where it's the evening. Have a nice day for those who are on a daytime area. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.